Okay, well, welcome to Synergy Online, and thank you all for attending Power BI. Just a reminder that all attendees will be muted throughout the presentation, but if you have a question at any time, we'll be collecting those in the questions module on your toolbar, and we'll provide answers as we go along. Now I'd like to welcome Darren Morgan, Business Analyst and Senior Consultant at Key2Act. Darren joined Key2Act in 2005, serving our customers with his expertise in mobile tech, schedule, Power BI, and optimizing business processes. Prior to joining Key2Act, Darren worked as a network and system administration consultant before finally specializing in ERP software conversions, first certified with Solomon and then with Dynamics GP. Welcome, Darren.
All right, thanks, Laura. And thanks everyone for attending. As I was looking at this cover slide, I thought, man, the name Power BI is a little bit generic, and I just want everybody to understand that we're going to talk about Power BI kind of at a high level, give you some ideas about if you're going to deploy Power BI, some of the things that you need to think about. And we'll talk about the infrastructure of how it's set up a little bit and take a look at the reports themselves and some things to think about. So my first exposure to business intelligence reporting came just a few years ago. I've always been a data guy. Like Laura said, back in the 90s, I was a network administrator, but I got certified in Solomon software and kind of became an expert in data migrations. Got into SQL Server, was a SQL Server administrator in the late 90s, and got certified in Dynamics GP, or Great Plains at the time. And that really became my introduction to data and reporting and understanding of data on an enterprise ERP type of level. But I've always been sort of an analyst. I really enjoy analyzing the numbers and slicing and dicing info. But several years ago, after LLR took over and we got our new management team, we really didn't have any business intelligence reporting ourselves. And I was asked to do a little bit of research into business intelligence software at the time. And back in late 2014, early 15, the market space was quite a bit different than it is today. I looked at Tableau and Qlik. They were really the industry leaders at that point in time, and IBM had an offering at the time, and a lot of people had already started making investments in some other softwares because Microsoft was seriously lagging in the industry, and Power BI hadn't quite made a name for itself and hadn't made a splash. But Tableau and Qlik, what I observed in analyzing their software at the time, they only allowed you a 30-day trial. And their software in that 30-day trial was kind of a stripped down version of their software. And it really struck me because the overall cost of those business intelligence solutions at the time would have been tens of thousands of dollars for most of our customers. And I thought it was, kind of absurd to have to make such a big financial decision based on a 30-day trial of a stripped down product. So when Microsoft presented Power BI to the world, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO at the time, he really wanted to own the market space. And the decision was made that Power BI Desktop would be given away as a free, fully functional version of the software. And it made a big difference in the market space, and Microsoft quickly gained market share as a result of that decision. But the biggest limitation of Power BI Desktop is there's no convenient way to share the reports. And it was a brilliant marketing strategy from my perspective. You could take a screenshot and kind of get a static image of a report that you may have created, but you couldn't interact with the data. And that's really the beauty of business intelligence software, is to look at the data and observe it in different ways using slicers and, slice and dice that data so you can kind of analyze it from different perspectives. So in order to use that data and consume it, your users in your office need to have access to Power BI Professional. So Power BI Professional, the full retail price is $9.99 per user per month. So if they don't have access to Office 365, then that would be the cost of just licensing Power BI Professional by itself. But if you are an Office 365 subscriber, there are different packages, and I'm not an expert in licensing at all. But I know that if you subscribe to the higher level packages for Office 365, Power BI Professional is included in that package, and your net cost overall is much less than the $10 per user per month. So keep that in mind. If you're not familiar with the Gartner group, Gartner always publishes these magic quadrants. And what you'll see here is, as of January of last year, Microsoft was dominating the market in Power BI. Now, historically, back when I was doing some analysis, I wasn't really high on Microsoft Power BI at the time because Microsoft was right around the center of this grid. I think they were below the horizontal line and just to the right of the vertical line, but they just weren't really a player. Now, in Microsoft's Power BI history, really, Satya Nadella, he inherited Microsoft from the previous CEO, Ballmer, and I was not impressed with the way Ballmer was running Microsoft at the time. And they hadn't really made any investments in business intelligence, even though it was a software that was up and coming and starting to dominate the market. The only offerings that Microsoft had at the time was some SQL Server reporting services. Back in 2013, some of you who are heavy Excel users, you might remember some of the Excel 2013 add-ons, such as Power Pivot, Power Query, and Power Map. Those were fun tools and really made Excel a much more robust reporting tool. But I found at the time, and I've been a heavy Excel user for many, many years, but I found that like Power Map, it was kludgy, it was hard to use. And so what happened when Satya Nadella took over Microsoft, he immediately looked at the Power BI market space and said, I want to own this market space. And they put 240 people on the development team for Power BI. And in just about 9 months, released their first iteration of Power BI Desktop. And the rest, as they say, is history because they've done nothing but expand in the market ever since. So I really credit Microsoft CEO for making this strategic change. So as you can see, Microsoft is now kind of owning this market space. So when we talk about Power BI Desktop, it can be downloaded and installed on any desktop computer in your office or laptop. There's also, Microsoft is offering free training. There's, last time I checked, over 25 hours of free online video training, and as well as plenty of documentation. And if you look around YouTube, there's plenty of webinars and YouTube videos in how to create Power BI reports. So it's really gotten a strong foothold in the market space. And so there's a lot of free resources out there to use. Now, Power BI Desktop, it is the tool for creating your reports. In the Dynamics GP world, I think a lot of you probably own SmartList Builder and SmartList. And I would describe Power BI Desktop as the equivalent of SmartList Builder. So the people who are using Power BI Desktop need to have an understanding of SQL table structure, but the Power BI Professional is using the Power BI service, which is a web-based view of that data as it sits in the cloud. So that would be more the equivalent of SmartList itself, where the users who are viewing those reports have the ability to manipulate that data and slice it and dice it and make enhancements to the existing data set, but they won't be changing the core data that makes up that report. Now, all of that data that's accessed through your browser is sitting in the Azure cloud. Now, that data is ported up to the Azure cloud using Power BI Gateway. So the gateway is a service that would be installed on a server on your network, and it would automatically, from the Azure cloud, tap into that gateway service and upload the data as needed. And then, of course, there's Power BI Mobile. So all of your Power BI reports can be formatted in a screen size so that they show up on a mobile device. So as we talk about Power BI desktop usage, like I said, it's so important that the people who are using Power BI desktop understand SQL. They need to understand table relationships, how to join tables and join data. And the same thing holds true for SmartList Builder. You want to make sure that anybody in your office who is designing reports and creating them has the requisite knowledge to do your table joins correctly. Otherwise, you might be looking at some data that hasn't been joined properly, and you might be missing out on something. So it's very important, I can't emphasize that enough, that the people who are using Power BI Desktop need to have that background knowledge. So another aspect of creating those reports, and if you have that SQL background and SQL knowledge, you'll understand that there are certain SQL queries that can really bog down your server. So as you're building Power BI reports, you really need to focus on SQL performance and make sure you're not overburdening your server by making a lot of direct queries with a whole lot of complex data behind it. And keep in mind that a user's ability to access the SQL data will be controlled through SQL user permissions. So let's talk a little bit about our no reports. So we created a handful of report templates for both service management and job costs, and we created those early on. And we really designed these reports to be a good example of the types of things that could be created using Power BI. So it's a good starting point. If there's somebody in your office who's good at reporting, they could probably pick up Power BI and start creating or enhancing those existing reports. But when you download those reports, you're downloading a template. So when you open those reports, and it's just like any other Microsoft application, you'll simply go to the File menu and click the Open. But it's important that you select the Power BI template files and open them up. Now, when you open those reports, the first thing it's going to do is prompt you to connect to your SQL server. So you'll have to enter your SQL server name and the instance that you're using, as well as the database name that you want to point to. And the next step, it will be, how are you going to authenticate as your user ID? Now you'll see in this example that I just logged on using the SQL administrator. I typically will start using the SA because it eliminates any permissions issues related to the reporting. But when you actually get to the point of publishing those reports and sharing them, you're going to want to make sure that the users are accessing it based upon their Active Directory user ID. So you'll want to set up SQL permissions appropriate to that user. Now, when you load the no report templates, you will be prompted that a lot of the reports, several of them, use a native database query. So this gets back to making sure that you're not overburdening your server when you're making some of these queries, but you will be prompted by Power BI Desktop that you are going to be running a native database query. Are you sure you want to do this? Just click the run button and move through.
Darren?
Yeah,
There is a question on how to get the reports. I assume they're referring to the templates from No.
yeah. So we've created those, but we do ask that you just request them from your CSM. I've been engaged with several customers and I could give them away as well, but we want to make sure that you understand some of these details that I'm talking about before you start playing around with them. So yeah, you can reach out to your CSM. So when you get the reports loaded, the report will appear as you see here. There are several different parts of the report, different graphs and data, and you'll see on the left-hand side the slicers. So the user interface, and this is one of the things that the beauty of Power BI Desktop, in my opinion, I found that it was very easy to pick it up and use Power BI Desktop. You'll see the visualizations, the different graph types are at the tops of the visualization columns, creating filters for the data that's being observed, and then too on the right hand side you've got a field list of the tables that are being used or the query results that are being brought into the report. And if you expand those, you'll see all the various fields that are within those tables. And I must say that when I first picked it up and started creating some reports that were map based, similar to what I had attempted to do with Excel Power Map back in 2013, I was able to create some map-based reports far easier than using the Excel Power Map interface years ago. So I think one of the things that Microsoft did quite well is they really simplified the visualization capabilities of Power BI, and it's one of the reasons that I really like it. But this is the way that the reports would appear within Power BI Desktop. So you see the button bar like you would with any other Microsoft Office application. But after you've got the report imported from the templates, you could make modifications to it and customize it. Maybe you want to change the appearance of the slicers or do away with one portion of the report. You can make all of those modifications, and once you've got it customized to your needs, you're going to want to publish that report. So one of the things that we'll talk about here in the next few minutes is going to be understanding that data refresh and the timing of that. As I mentioned, some queries that are in reports could bog down your SQL Server, so you got to be conscious of, when I'm accessing this report or refreshing that data. You don't want to cause problems for the rest of your users if they're long-running queries. So you can refresh the report in Power BI Desktop just by clicking the refresh button. But once it gets published to the Azure cloud, we'll talk about scheduling a refresh of that data in a few minutes. So with Power BI Desktop, it functions just like any other Microsoft Office application. When you've customized that report to meet your needs, you can save it to your local hard drive or a shared space on the network, and other people in the office could use Power BI Desktop and they could access the report that way. So you could share reports for individuals around the office, but I caution against that because anybody who's got access to Power BI Desktop can change that report and maybe affect a table join or maybe damage the report in some way. So you really have to be cautious of the users who have access to Power BI Desktop and make sure that they have an understanding of the danger of reporting damages. So once you've got that report customized and ready to publish and share with other users, you're going to use the publish button. And that will be published up to your Azure cloud. Now, if you're a Microsoft Office subscriber, it would be a shared Azure environment for all of your Office 365 users. It can be published to your personal cloud if you're just a single user. Now, once it gets published up to the cloud, any Power BI professional users will be able to access the data, and they'll access it through what Microsoft calls workspaces. The workspaces, the way I try to relate the functionality of workspaces is it's no different than shared folders on your network file server. You can set up permissions so that you limit the users who are accessing a folder, just as you would sharing a workspace in the cloud. As you're creating your workspaces, I typically start out when I am engaging with a customer on a Power BI project, I make the assumption that executive people, or executive managers at the company, they will probably have access to all data. They're free to look at payroll data. They're free to look at high-level financials data. So at the highest level would be your executive team that would have access to a workspace for the executives. Below that, you have to consider what sort of permissions do people have, or what should they have in order to access data. So obviously any payroll-related Power BI reports need to be limited just to payroll people. High-level accounting reports need to be limited to the controller and other high-level accounting people. So just keep that in mind and build out your workspaces so that your permissions of people who access reports in those workspaces kind of make sense for your environment. When you're granting access to a workspace, you're going to do that through email, and you're going to send an invitation to the workspace to users. So Microsoft made some changes last year. They have the classic workspaces to the new workspaces, but for the most part, the workspaces function like folders to store reports, like I said. So another aspect of the reporting, and I always have to ask customers, how strict are you about sharing data for these reports? An open type organization might allow free sharing of financial data related to jobs across multiple project managers. But I have been in offices where they don't want people from branch office A looking at financial data from branch office B. So the reports associated with pulling data out of those two branch offices for job profitability or service profitability, those reports then would need to be filtered. It's the same data set, and the same initial report that you're starting with. But as you're building your workspace, you're going to use Power BI Desktop to put filters onto those reports. So rather than offering a slicer to show the difference between branch office A and branch office B, we would put in a filter so that only branch office A data is contained in this report. We would save that report in Power BI Desktop with that filter on it, and then publish it to the branch office A workspace. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about shared permissions and who should have access to the right data contained within that report, and you want to build out your workspaces accordingly. So let's talk a little bit about the Power BI Gateway. I've helped numerous customers get this installed over the years. It's the biggest rule is that this Power BI Gateway needs to be installed in an always-on server. So in any one of our customers' environments, the SQL server is always on. If you've got a mobile tech server, it's always on. Terminal server, it could be installed on any one of them. And frankly, it's a simple operating system service. And well, we'll talk about that in just a minute. But downloading the gateway is done using the Power BI Professional in the cloud. And you see the download button in the browser. And so you'll just download it and install it onto the server. when you're installing it, you want to make sure that you're installing the on-premises gateway. I talked earlier, if you could run Power BI Professional just for yourself, and you could publish it to your personal cloud. In that case, you would be creating a personal gateway. But for businesses, we're going to be doing the on-premises gateway. Now, after installing it, the server on which it is installed will have this on-premises gateway application as a part of it. It's also installed as an operating system service. And so any administrator on the server could go into services and check on the service, restart the service, change the logon permissions. All of those things that a network administrator would normally do can be done using the services application on the server, as well as the on-premises gateway software. So once that gateway has been installed on your server in your office, in the cloud, one of your administrators of Office 365 is going to have to go in and get the data source configured for the cloud application to reach back down through that gateway and capture the data from your SQL server. So again, this is somebody who needs to be a SQL administrator in your office, and the permissions will be established. And once that gateway is created and the permissions are, and authentication is done initially, it'll be there for everyone else to use. So once that gateway has been established in the cloud, your reports that are published up to the cloud will need to be scheduled for a refresh. As I talk to customers about, planning your Power BI deployment, you want to let all of your users know that, Power BI isn't necessarily designed to do real-time querying of data. It's best for data analysis. And for that, I would say, we don't need today's data. So typically, I would recommend that we always install or schedule our report refreshes to take place overnight. And as you're educating your users, you just have to let everybody know that what you're looking at is data that was current as of last night or this morning at 6 a.m. So I learned the hard way when creating this refresh schedule that you don't want to overwhelm your server with too much querying. So like I said, the queries that are built into some of these reports might be pulling a big data set. So it's important that when you're looking at scheduling your data refreshes for your reports, you want to stagger those reports out over time at night, and typically we would do that overnight. So when you're scheduling the refresh, you can see the highlighted section in the page to schedule the refresh. It's going to open up a window similar to this, where you're going to select how often this report is going to be refreshed. So what I've learned the hard way, we overwhelmed some people's gateways, and we were getting timeouts where the data just simply couldn't be refreshed all at once for all of the reports they had on their server. So I started staggering these reports. So I'll do 1 or 2 reports at 1 a.m. or midnight. I'll do 1 or 2 reports at 12:30 a.m., 1 or 2 reports at 1 a.m., and so on, every half hour over the course of the evening. You could also take a closer look at some of the queries, how big the data set is for any given report, and stagger them out. So you might have 4 or 5 reports with a very small data set, and you could combine those with one large report. So it's not necessarily that only 1 or 2 reports could be refreshed. It's really the quantity of data in those reports overall that you need to concern yourself with. So just keep that in mind, that pulling data through your gateway is like anything else. It takes time. You don't want to flood the pipe with too much data because you get timeouts with the server. So one of the keys is down in the lower right, you'll notice the last refresh date and time. So all of our no templates that we have created have that date refresh and time refresh. And the data set will be updated in the cloud, but the individual reports will not. So as you're training your users, you'll want to let everybody know that the refresh button is available in the cloud, and you want to make sure that when you're looking at that data and you're slicing it and analyzing it, you always want to look down in the lower right and make sure that you're looking at current data as of last night. So it's important to understand the concept of reports versus dashboards. So all of our no reports, they are compiled of all of the different parts of the report that you see there. And for different managers and different departments, they might want to focus on just a couple of those KPIs. And they might want to focus on a handful of KPIs that are in several different reports. Well, all of those little parts of the report can be pinned to a dashboard. So a dashboard is simply a compilation of other data from other reports or KPIs from other reports. So as you're looking at that report, you could say, hey, I want this, I want to focus on this on a daily basis, and I want to put this on my home page for my browser so that every time I open my browser, I'll have my dashboard and my critical KPIs. So the users are going to want to create their own dashboards, and in doing so, when they select the pin to pin that visual to a dashboard, they will then be prompted to say, what do you want to call this dashboard? So, every departmental manager is probably going to have a few different dashboards that they might want to focus on, and they could give them different names. And so this is just saving that data that they want to focus on and giving it the name that they want to apply to it. So once you've created those dashboards for yourself, you will see those dashboards appear on your Power BI Professional page in the cloud. So you could see the list of reports shows up in the left-hand navigation menu. And as you build more and more dashboards, those dashboards would also appear. And you could see there on the menu, once I've created a dashboard, I could share my dashboard with other users as well as sharing reports. So all of that is just kind of a high-level overview of what to expect when you're deploying Power BI and creating that reporting environment in the cloud for your users. So thanks, everyone. Laura?
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your presentation, Darren, and thank you to all of our attendees for joining us to learn more about Power BI. If you have questions after today's session, you can email us at synergy@key2act.com, and we'll follow up with you directly. All of our Synergy online sessions will be posted to the Key2Act resources site early next week, and you'll receive an email notification at that time. You can go to the next slide. A special thank you to our sponsors who are really looking forward to connecting with you at Synergy this year. If you have interest in learning more about our sponsors, please visit the Key2Act resources site or reach out to your CSM. Next slide. A reminder that we're giving away a $500 gift card of your choice. The more sessions you attend, the more chances you have to win. And you can register for additional sessions by clicking the link in the chat box. Last slide. Our next session, What is True Intelligence, is our last session today and begins at 3 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for attending.